Hey, Nat here with an Adobe Illustrator tutorial. In today's video, we're going to start off with the basics of creating basic shapes. So you can go ahead and first off just create any size document. This is an 8.5 inch by 11 inch piece of paper, basically regular letter size. And the first thing we want to do before every tutorial is just make sure we're looking at the same thing as far as our interface. So where we want to go to do that is just go to Window, and you want to go to Workspace. And then under Workspace, you want to make sure that Essentials Classic is selected. And then just to be sure, you can also just hit Reset Essentials Classic, which will just kind of make sure that it resets everything to the same thing. So if you do that, we should all be seeing the same interface. All right. So to create your basic shapes, which are your circles, rectangles, squares, etc., we are going to be using this tool over here. If you go over to your left to the toolbar, and your first thing you'll see here is the rectangle tool, which is this one right here. This rectangle little icon thing will pop up here, and then if you just select it, the way you draw a rectangle is basically you just click anywhere on the page where you want to kind of draw your rectangle, and then just click the mouse, hold it down, and then drag out a shape. And then once you get the shape that you like, it could be any shape right now, you just let go of the mouse. And there you've drawn a rectangle. So I'm just going to draw a couple other ones here of different sizes, right? Cool. Very easy. Basic, right? Now, what if you wanted to draw a perfect square? Well, you could try to do it by eye, right? But the reality is it may not be perfect. It may look right to you, but it may not actually be a square. So how do we do that? I'm going to hit undo here real quick. And the way you draw a perfect square is you're going to have to use a keyboard command while you drag out your shape. And this is going to be the first of many keyboard commands in Illustrator, and keyboard commands are critical, and memorizing them are critical to being able to use Illustrator or any graphics program well. So if you want to draw a perfect square, you basically got to hold down the Shift key as you drag out your shape. Again, I'm going to hit my Shift key, and then as I drag out my shape, I'm going to keep the Shift key pressed down until I get the right size of square that I'm looking for. And then I let go of the mouse first, and then I let go of the keyboard after that. If you let go of the keyboard first, you're gonna lose the shape. So for example, like if I have my Shift key held down, I start dragging out the rectangle, and then if I let go of the Shift key first, you'll see it kind of automatically goes back into freeform mode, right? That's not what we want. And actually, as long as I've got my mouse held here and still in freeform mode, if I actually hit the Shift key again, it'll snap back into, this is what we call constrained proportions. And this will become very important later. But just know for now that when you hold the Shift key down, it keeps it constrained to a particular proportion. And in this case, it is the proportion of a square. Now, if you notice, when I draw the square with the Shift key, it comes out from the corner of the square, right? There's another way where you can draw the square where if you hold down the Option and the Shift key, it will draw the square out from the center. And this can be very helpful sometimes because it can be a much more accurate way to place where exactly you want to put the circle. So for example, if I wanted to put a square right in the middle let's say put even a square in the middle of here somewhere, I can kind of try to find the closest thing to the center here, and then if I hold my Option and Shift key down, it'll draw the square out from that point. The last way you can draw any shape is, again, if you have the rectangle tool selected here, is if you just do like a single click anywhere inside this page, it'll pull up this dialog box here, right, in the center of the page. And as you can see, you have your width and your height here, and you can enter in exact numbers here. So for example, if let's say a business card is exactly, it's usually 3.5 inches by 2 inches. And you may need to write IN in there because, for example, it could also be pixels as a unit of measurement. So if you want to make sure that it's inches, make sure that you type IN in there. Sometimes it might be the default, but just to make sure. And then if you click OK, there you see here at the bottom, you've got your exact, a rectangle with the exact dimensions that you entered in. So as you know, just remember that with all these tools here, there's ways you can do things by drawing things out manually, and then there's going to be ways that you can do things exactly and numerically. And that's going to go for a lot of these different tools. All right, so that is your basic square and rectangle shape. We are now going to draw ellipses and circles. So if you again go over to your toolbar over here and you see rectangle, anytime you see any of these tools that have like a little triangle at the bottom of them, right, that means that if you hold down on it, it will pull up a side menu with more options that are underneath whatever is on top. So rectangle tool is the default on top. If you hold it down, right, you'll see a bunch of other options down here. So we are going to use the ellipse tool. So just if you leave your mouse button held down and you select on that, now you've got your ellipse tool, and it's the same concept as the rectangle tool. You can draw it out and you get different shapes of ellipses by clicking and dragging, right? And again, if you want to draw a perfect circle, which you are often going to want to do in Illustrator, what keyboard command do you have to hold down? That's right. If you hold down the Shift key, it'll draw perfect circles. As long as you hold that Shift key down and then you let go of the mouse first and then you let go of the key. And as you know, when you hit just the Shift key, it drags it out from the edge of the circle. So if you remember, if you actually want to draw something from the center of the circle, which again can be a more accurate way of drawing a shape, if you hold down the Option and the Shift key at the same time, it'll draw the circle out from the center. And the last way, as you remember, you can actually also create a ellipse or circle numerically. If you just single click anywhere blank in the document, it'll bring up the dialog box and you can enter the width and the height numerically in this window here. All right, so that is how you do ellipses and circles. The next type of shape we're going to cover is your polygon tool. So again, you go over to your toolbar here, you hold down on that tool to bring up the other options, and we are going to go to your polygon tool. And the polygon tool lets you draw shapes with numbers of different sides. So the default, if you just drag it out, will probably be the six-sided shape, right? The hexagon. And if you're just dragging it out, it'll be kind of freeform like this, right? And notice what happens when you drag it out with a Shift key. It makes sure that the hexagon stays on kind of like the straight horizontal plane there. So if you know you want a hexagon that's perfectly lined up horizontally, just hold that Shift key down, right? Otherwise, if you don't, you're going to have to kind of like eyeball it. And then again, if you want to draw it out from the center as opposed to the side, you can hit your Option and your Shift key. So that's 6 sides. What if I wanted a different number of sides? Well, one way is as you're dragging out the shape, you can use your up and down arrow keys to change the number of sides. So as you notice, as I'm hitting the up or down arrow key, it's changing the number of sides. So I'll go all the way down to 3, which is a triangle, hit my Shift key, and then there's my triangle, right? I'll drag it out again, and this time I'll go up. There's my 5 sides, the pentagon, right? And then again, lastly, with the polygon tool, is if you single click anywhere, it'll bring up the dialog box, and here you can enter in the actual number of sides numerically. So if I know I want, let's say, an octagon, I'll just put in 8. And then, you can kind of put the radius to whatever you want, but you can always change the size later. So I'm just going to hit OK. I'll just change it, make it 2 inches. And then click OK. And here is my octagon, 8 sides. So that is your polygon tool. The next one we'll do really quickly is just the star tool. So that's over here. If you hold this down again, and you'll notice there's one here for stars as well. And as it sounds, this is how you kind of draw your star shapes. Again, if you just do it freeform, you can do it any angle or any orientation, and then size. If you hold the shift key down, it'll kind of snap it to kind of like the horizontal. If you do Option and Shift, it draws it out from the center, right? I'm going to draw a big one here in the middle. And you're going to notice that there are a number of different kind of control points here that are around the bounding box. And these control points kind of affect different things with the star shape. So for example, this one, little slider here, if you slide it up and down, it changes the number of points. Actually, as I slide it down, it gives it more points, and as I slide it up, it takes away points, right? The next thing you can control is this right here. And if you kind of hover over it, you see that kind of like a dotted line kind of forms in the that's called the inner radius of the star. So this is your inner radius, and then the outside where all the points are, that's your outer radius. So another thing you might want to control is the inner radius of the star. So you can do that if you just drag this little thing there, sort of in and out. All right, so there's your kind of like sun shape, and this is maybe more like a star shape. And then again, as with all the other tools, you can also do the stars numerically. So again, if you have the star tool selected and you just click anywhere, it'll bring up this dialog box. And as you can see, you can enter in the number of points numerically, and you can define the inner radius and the outer radius. Or this might be the inner and the outer. Either way, right? And that is your basic creating of stars. The last thing I want to show you is a tool that we kind of skipped over, which was this rounded rectangle tool. And I'm going to show you in a little bit why this tool is kind of a leftover from previous versions of Illustrator, and you can still use it, but I have a preferred way of doing rounded corners on shapes. But I'm going to just select this for now and show you rounded rectangle. And this is how you draw rectangles with rounded corners to them. So just think of things that look like kind of like app icons or keyboard keys, right? Or search bars, right? So that's one way you can kind of do it. The other way you can kind of do it, which is my preferred way now, is if you just draw like a regular rectangle, you'll notice on the corners, when it's selected, you'll see these little dots on the inside. And basically, what you can do is just pull those dots in, right? And as you pull them in, it kind of rounds the corners for you. So I like doing it this way because it gives you a little bit more control over, kind of how much the corners are rounded, right? And the other cool thing is if, let's say you did a different shape. Let's say I'm going to go to a polygon. And I'll do 5 sides. Or I'll do 3. I'll do a triangle, right? Again, if you notice, the triangle also has those same things at the corners. So if I drag that in, I can now round the corners of this triangle. And likewise, I can do that with almost any shape that I draw. So here's the pentagon. Again, there's this little circle in there. If I pull that in, I can round those corners as well, right? And lastly, if you remember the star tool, you'll notice, again, a couple other places where you can kind of round the corners. You can round the corners of the outside points, or you can round the corner of the inside points. And then you can kind of get shapes like that. And that is how you create shapes with rounded corners.